And you're here for number 11 as well, authorizing submittal of an application for permanent local housing allocation funds.
All right, so this is an exciting revenue source that's come through recently, also with this SB2 funding, part of this bill. They've, through the state, what they've done is created another fee. And so, but with that fee, they've prioritized it for permanent housing and for homelessness. And so through the transaction of refinances and county fixture, basically recording, when they record documents at the recorder's office, they're charging them a $75 fee, up to $225 per transaction. And so with that fee, it's provided a funding source for housing. And so what the state has done is they've set it up where they want to plan for 5 years, and they're going to give you single year allotments, and it's formula based to match the CDBG entitlement city process. And so they've worked it out that per this 195 million that they're expecting to bring in, they're going to break it out. And so with that, basically the city's first year allocation is $311,000. Back up a little bit here. The purpose tonight with the staff report before you is to obtain state grant funds to further the city's efforts to provide affordable housing and assist with homelessness. And so the items that are for consideration are, in layman terms, authorize Development Services Director, myself, to submit an application for these grant funds, have council provide input on how we want to spend these funds on eligible items, and approve that funding plan, and then authorize the finance director to receive that allocation and able to spend it. So those are basically the three goals with this item tonight. And so I'm really looking for council direction on how we want to allocate this this funding source for the year with this plan, and then also for 5 years is how we do it. And so HCD has allocated $311,140 to Yuba City for fiscal year 2021. So that's what's been collected for that year. It's sitting in a reserve account waiting for the city to draw it. The city is projected to receive approximately $1.9 million over a 5-year period. And the city can utilize up to 5% of its annual allocation for administrative costs. So, so with this, we'll be looking for $311,000. I believe the administration cost, if we hold that in our reserves and take that off the top, is around $15,000. And that really is what I would say would be nice to keep at a certain level to handle the reporting requirements, the planning, and just the fund management of that for staff time. And so the numbers don't exactly add up, 311,000 times 5. That was a projected based on what the state gave as a projection. And obviously, I think it's probably not gonna meet expectations with COVID-19 occurring. And so right now I know I have 311,000 in the bank. I don't know if at the end of 5 years, we're actually gonna be at 1.9 plus, it's gonna be plus or minus. And so we're playing with about $300,000 a year is what the estimate is. So through this, they want us to set up a 5-year plan where we basically submit an application that says a certain dollar amount or a certain percentage of that revenue goes to eligible activities. And the summary of those activities, there's 10, is there 10 or 6? I'm looking at Jaspreet, who is really into the weeds with this, but they're really specific. And if you look at these items 1 through 10, there's really about 2 or 3 that are doable. With the first one being the pre-development, development, acquisition, rehabilitation, preservation of multifamily residential live work rental housing that is affordable to extremely low, very low, moderate income households. And so so I need to submit a plan by the end of the month that basically directs how we're going to spend this money. And then with that, I have through the year, I could adjust that up to 10% for each of the items. or annually, I could amend the plan substantially. If all of a sudden we want to put 100% in one bucket, and then next year we want to move it to a different bucket, we'd have to do that with an annual update. And so those on that green slide, those were long-winded descriptions that basically have these bullet point items. So eligible activities increase. So the items are: increase the supply of housing for households at or below 60% area median income, increase assistance to affordable owner-occupied workforce housing, assist persons experiencing or at risk of homelessness, facilitate housing affordability, particularly for low and moderate income households, promote projects and programs to meet the local government's unmet share of regional housing needs allocation, ensure geographic equity in the distribution of the funds. And so through the staff report, we know there's a lot of competing interests with homelessness and with housing. And we've heard from different partners, including the Regional Housing Authority and the Yuba City Homeless Consortium, just on looking for, as they try to leverage their needs, they're looking for opportunities to fund. And then there's also city needs, direct city needs, where if the city has a particular project that they want to work on that meets this. And so to start the discussion, what I've done here and through the staff report on the plan is $311,000. I've taken the 5% off the top. That leaves you $295, and then I've got it proposed right now at a 50% split, and then I've shown that number to kind of give you the number of what that means if we wanted to direct a certain amount to the county for improvements on 2nd Street or for homelessness to the consortium, or if we want to add it to a permanent housing project that the Housing Authority is working towards, that represents the city. And so also to add to that, the Executive Director, Gus Becerra, with the Regional Housing Authority has put in a comment, and just to bring up and highlight one of the projects that he has in the works, that if to make sure all of the council know about one of the projects they have that is working through the process right now. And so I guess with that, I will, the few projects that I'm aware of is there's some interest in the county for partnership with homelessness. There's the Homeless Consortium has reached out to us to bring an item forward to council for consideration of support funding the executive director's position. And then the Regional Housing Authority, who serves as the city's partner in really helping us achieve affordable housing through permanent housing. They're really how the city with a pass-through is what we use to help meet some of the housing goals that we have for the various CDBG and different housing programs we have. And so they're all happy to spend the money of what's available or for what their project, what we prioritize. And so I'll read Mr. Becerra's email that came through with a specific request. So good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. As you prepare your plan for the PLHA funding from the state for the next 5 years, I would like to introduce to you a new project planned in Yuba City. The Regional Housing Authority is in the early pre-development and planning phase for a new affordable housing project to be named Richland Village. Located at 470 Bernard Drive, we have a meeting next week with Mr. Ben Moody to review our architect's initial site plan design. Richland Village will consist of approximately 100 to 150 units with 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units targeting the Yuba City's workforce with incomes at or below 60% of the AMI area median income. A financial performer for the project is still not ready, as we need to finalize the site plan design in order to get an accurate unit count. A first draft of the financial performa should be available in late August. We are anticipating financing the project using the following funding sources: state HCD, HSCD funds, Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Cap and Trade Program. Application is due in February 2021. 4% low income housing tax credits, tax exempt housing bonds, city PLHA funding, if council approves, city low mod funds if available and if the council approves. When we complete the financial performa, we will provide to city staff the exact amounts being requested to the city for your consideration. A unique aspect of the project will be the coordination and partnership with Yuba City Transit as HCD competitively scores the AHSC application with how the public transit component is incorporated. We're meeting with them next week to coordinate our application and look at the possibility of AHSC financing the housing project while also financing electric buses and the construction of a transit facility with charging stations at different locations, though not at the housing site. I would be happy to answer any questions you may have or meet with you individually, albeit socially distanced. And Gus is on the line via chat if there are specific questions at the end. And so with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions and then work through how we would like to prioritize this, if keep it at this level or shift it around. I think an easy way is probably on a percentage basis on which items are a priority, and I'll take note.
Yeah, through the mayor. So you're asking, it sounds like, Benny, you're asking us for some specific direction tonight.
Yeah, I mean, for tonight, I'd really like to have, with the due date being the 27th of June, so pretty much next week. July. Time flies. That if the council has a project out there that's $250,000 for homelessness or $200,000 or some sort of idea, that I could put that in the percentage for submittal. So I get an 80-20, 100, 0, 90, 10 for housing versus homelessness. That would get the application submitted, the money coming in this year, it'd get us rolling, and then we could amend as necessary.
So is there, I know Mr. Becerra's put forth a project. Were there any other entities besides the Homeless Consortium and their desire to have us pay for a CEO? Is there anything else pending out there?
I did not, I want to help, that's great input. With this funding source, it was new and the deadline was tight, and so there has not been an outreach by the city to request for allocation. Gus and Regional Housing is definitely tracking it on their side, and they knew of the funding source. And the Homeless Consortium, one of their consultants, it was aware of the source coming through, and so there was specific requests from them, but there wasn't. The city didn't broadcast out regarding any specific requests at this time. And so, one more thing on the funding. With Richland Village for Gus, with this funding source, you're able to leverage it 5 years. And so if he needs, or the city needs, or whatever our priority is, I could ask for 5 years up front if that helps with the deal. It's a little bit dicey when they tell you 1.8's anticipated, and you don't quite know if that's going to fully be obtained. But there is a process in the guidelines for the money that you could request 5 years up front.
Okay. I guess, given the time crunch, I'm personally more interested in actual projects rather than funding staff. So, Mr. Becerra's project, partnering with the county for whatever homeless project they might have. I'm also, I would like to retain at least some input into these projects rather than just hand over money that we take in. So when it comes to over-engineering, over-designing, and those types of things, do we have that ability, or is it just strictly this group comes to us, wants some of our money, and we give it to them, or do we retain any kind of input or feedback into that project?
So right now, the plan would just designate it into buckets, and then the city would retain control on how we allot that bucket. And we would have to follow up with an individual breakout unless there was direction tonight on that. But I'm anticipating putting it into these buckets and then coming back to council regarding how to allocate that individual bucket. And so with the regional housing, it's with housing period, with this goal up top, this number one is the eligible activity. The funding can be put in there for the year, or we could actually request all 5 years put into that. So you basically have 1.8 sitting there. And it sounds like we have some flexibility on the time to deliver that, to spend it. They will have to do reporting and updates, but we've talked with the staff writer, our grant writer, and then who's real familiar with the funding source, and then with the state, that you have to do, but that is an option. You could put all the money in housing, and you could technically sit on it until Richland Housing possibly has a project that's ready to go, or the city could put it into that bucket and we could piecemeal it out.
Okay, I guess I do think there's a need in both areas. I don't know necessarily how you allocate at this point, not knowing only one project that's been up there and others that we know are out there. But again, my point would be is I'd much rather see projects rather than staff.
I think maybe right now, maybe we're kind of at a higher level right now. We can decide what percentage we would like to go to our homeless, what percentage for housing, and with the third category, fine. But then that gives you some direction as to how much you're able to spend. And when the project's more specific, then we can go ahead and have our say-so. Is that the way it's supposed to work? But
So it'd be nice to get it close. If there's a project that I'm unaware of, right now, I split it. I split it at 50-50. And then if you have a project tomorrow at 200,000, let's bump it up and change it here to put that money in the bucket. But if we do it 50-50 now, that puts us in the queue. We get the money coming through, and then we adjust the plan as projects come in.
Okay.
Through the mayor. Were you going to ask another?
Yeah, just real
Okay.
quick.
Go ahead.
Do we have, regarding the funding staff for the CEO of the consortium?
So the request is for
much?
$12,500, and there's been a communication that we're planning to bring to council for a review and consideration for the timeline.
They want us to kick in 12.5?
12,500.
12.5. Yeah, okay, thank you. And then what is the total compensation? I just want to make sure the request and the ask is, proportional to the benefit.
I don't have those numbers. I believe they were short.
Would you like me to answer that? I do know the answer to that, Mayor. It is $55,000 for the salary of the new CEO. So
a little less than a quarter.
yes, and multi-jurisdictions were all contributing to this particular new, it's a new
The
position.
traditional source of funding is that jurisdictions contribute.
Yes, multiple jurisdictions are contributing.
And Ben, that is above and beyond the admin you have shaved off up there.
Correct. That 5% admin shaved off is for city staff. And that can be redirected also. My recommendation is 15,000 for staff time.
Sure.
It gets eaten up pretty fast.
Yeah, it does.
Also, the mayor, on that 12.5, that was discussed over a year ago with the JPA, homeless JPA, with the cities and the counties when they went to go out for this position for the executive director.
All right.
Through the mayor, what happened is that also because of COVID-19, that got stalled, and it was actually working through the process of that, what Councilman Cardoso was mentioning.
All right. Were you aware of that, sir?
My comment stands.
It's your comment stand. Okay, so I think it's important, this is my personal opinion too, that if we're going to contribute, we're going to have the homeless consortium, we need to pay somebody to run it. And if we're going to divide it up and we need to pay our fair share, we should take about 6,000 off of each of those half categories rather than have the benefit of our community being, having received help with homelessness and the housing, but not contributing to the staff for it. I think it's important. Staff costs money, my opinion only. Now, Ben, does the 50%, is that your recommendation? Are you okay if you walked away with that today? Or are you looking for us to say, hey, you need to fund?
Without any specific projects in the queue, I'm okay with this today because it gets us moving forward. The regional housing definitely has an interesting project, but as stated, we're still looking for the pro forma. There's still a lot of unknowns with the leveraging and obtaining the grant and then the timeline that does put this that does leave it a little bit fuzzy for a funding source that we need to take in and get off the books. And so that's where Gus is kind of working with his team to put that together and be able to put a presentation before us. I do not have a specific need for homelessness at this time besides that 12,500. So 150,000 is quite a bit more than that for the request that comes in. But I know that there's been some internal discussion, or there might be higher level discussions going on needs, and with homelessness being a big deal.
Yeah, it'd be nice to know what other projects might be floating around out there too, and then what Gus's specific ask is, but kudos to him for monitoring everything, that's for sure. He's doing his job, appreciate that. And we would like to be helpful and assist. I mean, that's what the money's supposed to be for anyway. So, all right, anybody else, have any further comments or anything? I'm sorry, were you done?
Thanks, Councilman Shaw. My question, I think you kind of answered it a little bit, Ben. I wasn't clear with the Housing Authority if they had already developed a budget for the actual development of this village, Richland Village project that they're proposing to us. Do we know the entire cost of that?
I do not.
There's no cost at this time, Grace. It's still in the stages.
It's the development stage. Okay, so
That's what they're going to bring to Ben here. Like he was saying, that's what we're going to be bringing to Ben.
I know they're working hard because they're working on some timelines for the application, and a little bit I understand of it from the preliminary discussions. They're trying to make it as dense as possible in order to qualify for this money, and the higher the density, the higher the cost, right, with multi-stories and the number of units. And so it was a big number, and it was a convoluted funding source, similar to New Haven, as you saw in the Richland, where there's a lot of convoluted funding sources going on in order to make it happen. And so that's where a lot of time is being spent to try to package that together to see how it works.
So then that ties into, because this is a 5-year funding period, if let's say Richland Housing is not able to secure the project within that 5-year period, are we at risk of losing those funds?
There definitely would have to be a discussion where I'd be getting nervous year 3, year 4. If that funding's not in there, I have to figure out a way to get it spent.
And so with the homeless consortium, we are also tracking all this funding because there's quite a bit of monies that are coming in. So I think what I would suggest to the council is that, we're going to be putting together this regrouping, this ad hoc homeless. There's possibilities with Sutter County. There's other options, but I think that if you put them in 2 categories, as you're suggesting, there's always the option of amendment, which is not a favorable one, but we could always amend. I love supporting permanent housing. I mean, it's needed. I'm just not clear with all the details to the Richland Village at this point, and the development of that, to put the monies aside. I'm very familiar with these funds, so I hope not to risk other projects not being funded because we set aside the monies and they're not ready for us. Richland Housing.
I think that makes complete sense. And I think, Ben, you were okay with 50% for housing in general, correct? And then 50% for homelessness. We
Correct.
don't have to dedicate to the project.
So half of it right now, the way it's written, is that 50% of that available money, so 150,000, would go to housing, and it's dedicated in that bucket, and that bucket is general enough that it could be for the rehab of existing facilities, small one-apartment improvement, or it could go towards ultimate Richland Village project.
Okay, that clarifies more. Thank you. And I'm going to finish this one, Councilman Shaw, so then give it to you. I do support with the homeless consortium because it's not just a staffing that is being hired. It's managing the projects of about 14, 15 other nonprofits that are under the homeless consortium. And as a matter of fact, Richland Housing also receives monies through the consortium that comes from multiple other sources. So if you like, after we put these monies aside, we can have presentations from Richland Housing and the Homeless Consortium. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, through the mayor. A question for Mr. Becerra, and he can answer while we're continuing on, but what is the projected timeline that they're hoping to get Richland Village off the ground? And I know it's a guess, but I'm just curious, is it a 3-year timeline, a 5-year timeline? And while he's responding on that question, I go back to what the vice mayor said earlier. I'm more about real projects and getting things done. And I know I've been kind of critical at times of the regional housing in the past because looking at how things have been spent. But kudos to Mr. Becerra for bringing this because this is exactly the type of project I can get behind because it's not repairing an existing building that, we've been down that avenue before, but this is actually giving us 100 new units. This is actually doing something to have affordable housing to get those numbers. So I like the project. And, as far as hiring admin, CEOs, bureaucracy, as I call it, that really needs to come out of some kind of, we've got all the different monies coming around. So I would not want to take special allocations like this to fund a CEO. It really needs to go to what it's intended for, which is direct results. And one of the biggest problems we have right now in our area is Sutter County is trying to find a place for the homeless so they can park their motor homes, so they can have their tent cities, things of that nature. And I know that's a problem for our sheriff and our chief of police and all the men and women that serve under them. So we could do this and help me, Mr. Moody, if I'm just thinking long-term here. If Sutter County was to come up with a project and need that, we could accelerate either halves of these to get 5 years of funding in, correct? To be a part of securing a location to have homeless population housed. Is that correct?
Yes, we would amend the plan, and then amend the plan for what that dollar amount is, and then advance that portion of the funding.
Okay.
And so there'd be some coordination with the state in a review period, but that sounds like it's the flexibility of the funding source.
Okay. Yeah, I'm very, very high level at this, but the point being is, we've got these funds, they're for 5 years. I really want to see action out of it. And if we can spend a little over $1 million and get people actually off the street, even though 12,000 is a little amount, that's probably one more person that we can get off the street. Other communities have gone in and when I'm thinking out loud and, projects, they've had older hotels that were kind of not prosperous, and they bought those and they've converted those to housing. So there's a bunch of opportunities, and I know that we're kind of like, we've got this and only a few people know about it, and I don't want us to be whoever runs first gets it. We really need to think it through. But if we have that flexibility, I just want to see it actually be done to something that, where the rubber meets the road. It's projects. It's actually getting people off the street. And I think, Ms. Buckland, you've got the answer.
I do. Gus has a point of clarification for you, Councilmember Shaw. Mm-hmm. The Richland Village project target population is workforce housing, family units, not specifically targeting homelessness, although homeless can apply. And then timeline applying for the AHSC in February 2021, awards announced in June 2021, apply for tax credits in the fall of 2021, awards announced early 2022, start construction spring 2022.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Becerra. And I was clear on, I didn't mix it up. I know what it's the low mod, it's the low income, that's the housing, and that's great. We need that. That's the ratios, and that's perfect. But I want the other money trying to solve our homeless and it going right to where the rubber meets the road. So I'm fine with 50-50 as long as we can come back and talk about the underlying projects. So.
Mayor?
Yeah, go ahead.
Just to follow up and clarify for me at least, through the time on the council, I'm certainly not an expert, but I think the housing issue and the homelessness issue we've spent a lot of time. and a good time and had some excellent presentations. And what I think where my comments are coming from is what I kept hearing and do continue to hear from those folks who fashion themselves and are more knowledgeable than I on this is that one of the major problems in our community is affordable housing. And so it's sort of a chicken and an egg. The homeless sometimes become homeless because they can't afford to live in a house. And so, you know, where are we going to put something called the permanent local housing allocation funds if it's not for permanent local housing? And again, I'm not trying to discredit the fact that there's a homelessness need, but it appears to me that the intent here is permanent local housing. That's the title of the item here. And so if we can provide local housing for folks that is affordable, then they're not in that one instance where all of a sudden incident happens within their life and now they're living in their car, or their job is eliminated because of COVID and they're living in a car. You know, we have an option for them. We have a supply of housing that they could potentially be eligible for. So my comments are, let's build some housing. That's one way to attack the homelessness problem. Again, as Councilwoman Espandola says, there's all kinds of funding mechanisms out there. And I'm not trying to take one from the other, just this is permanent local housing. And to me, that's a straight face test is we should be really pushing towards local affordable housing. Mr. Broom talks about it. Our own EDC talks about it. We have to have a place for these people to live if we're going to have a place for them to come and work. And right now, the housing stock here in Yuba City does not support that. So I just wanted to make that statement.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. That was well received. I think your comments are right on the point with a lot of conversations about the lack of and the shortage of affordable housing. That is clearly an area that our community is needing more of. I work so intimately with the homeless community of issues and the partners that, you know, that I think sometimes I believe that everyone knows what I already know because I do it. But I guess I need to be more clear about the relationship between the consortium and the relationship between permanent housing and this money. The efforts of building permanent housing has always been a priority of the homeless consortium. So I think that there's a common interest there within the homeless consortium in building these permanent housing. What I have seen in the last 3 to 4 years is a stronger even partnership and relationship between the Housing Authority and the consortium. What was missing for many years was the coordination of multiple services from homeless community members. And so people were going to multiple places and duplication of services. And a lot of effort has been done to put all this together, and the board members, without a lead of a person who pull all these things together, everybody's a volunteer. So there hasn't been one lead person to help with the operations of now with the consortium at several $1 million and helping in multiple areas in a bi-county region. And so this new person that is hired, I would love to have the opportunity for him to present and just to bring up to date what the consortium is doing, not necessarily to hear the thought that, oh, it's another layer of administration, another layer of unnecessary in-betweens, to help understand how this person really is working on many of those issues that you just mentioned on the permanent housing, temporary housing, transitional housing, services at the coordinated entry locations, and helping that all of these things are coordinated throughout the region. That said, one thing that we have been seeing most recent is the need for housing prevention. In addition to permanent housing and affordable housing needing, housing prevention, meaning that to try to minimize the opportunity, the factors of why people end up homeless. And so I bring that forward just to help our council understand that the complexities of homelessness are just as complex as we think about COVID-19, and to find out what is most appropriate, a little bit of all of it is. And I mentioned that I was concerned with the time frame of 5 years, because I do not want to risk ourselves to lose those funds. But if Housing Authority can do their best to get this developed and funded, I would wholeheartedly support it. But I also think that the Homeless Consortium is a clear link to all of those programs and services between government, private, and nonprofit. So with that, I make the ask to have the Yuba City Homeless Consortium do a presentation in the future and introduce the executive director to the council, and hopefully answer any questions that you all might have, just to give some more clarity.
Do we have an executive director already on board?
Yes, he just started, yes.
How is he being paid if we haven't paid our share?
The funding's through the consortium.
Well, it was fronted through Yuba County, and then we were discussing our fees. And this was through the JPA. This was through the JPA that we've made with all our jurisdictions. We had a discussion almost 2 years ago, between a year and a half, 2 years ago, and we were each community was going to kick in a little bit to help pay for this gentleman's services.
I'm assuming that happened before we came on the council.
Yes, it did.
It's been a long discussion, Vice Mayor.
Yeah.
So before we make a recommendation, it sounds like we have a majority towards the permanent local housing. And so with that, if we bump that allotment up to a 90-10 permanent, and then there's an allowed 10% flexibility in there, that would basically allow you to flex 80 to 20 depending on what projects come forward. And so that would be, that would provide any activities towards homelessness, not just the consortium, the ability from around at the 10% level, just under 30,000 up to 60,000 without amending the plan and being pretty quick versus, and then with the housing component being at that higher dollar amount and having the flexibility to go all the way up to 100% if we really, council really chose when that performer comes through in the presentation with Gus, he has those numbers and says, hey, I could get funded if you advance me the 5 years at the 300,000, 1.5 million. And so for consideration, if that's the way that the council is leaning here with the permanent housing.
Through the mayor, I'm part of the Housing Authority. I've been on the board the last 4 years. I'm, all for this and stuff like that, but we have a homeless issue in our community, and especially since the COVID has hit, it has blossomed much more than it has in the last year or so, and the county is going to be coming to us asking for some help. And the county's, footing the full bill, and these folks are in our community, and we're going to need to help the county here. And I'd like to go with Councilman Shaw's recommendation for this year, because we can change it each year. And I'd like to go with the 50-50 split, because we're going to be asked here sometime in the very, very near future for some help with the county to help with this homeless situation in our community. I'm kind of going with 50-50 with Councilman Shaw.
All right, there must have been something when I was out of the room.
Nope, nothing.
I heard a 90-10 when I sat down, but that's okay. Is that a motion, sir?
No, I'm just saying I'd be happy to make.
Are we ready for that?
Are we ready for a motion?
So the only item left with my presentation is the items A through C, and I could elaborate if needed.
Okay. That's administrative part. The blood and guts is what you want as your percentage.
So how B is set up right now in your package is set up as a 50-50 split. And so before we make this recommendation, if you want to change the split, then we would need to give me that direction and then approve it with that.
All right.
And then we can go back and change this again next year, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
You mean amend it, right?
Yes, amend it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So do we have a motion anywhere?
I'd like to make a motion
Okay.
to staff's recommendations to adopt a resolution adopting authorizing development service directors to submit application in their projects utilizing the permanent local housing allocations. B, after consideration input from council regarding funding allegations, adopt a resolution approving the permanent local housing allocation funds, section 302C4 plan. And C, authorize finance director to amend fiscal year 2021 budget to receive funding and establish a CIP account 951281 for permanent local housing allocation funds in the amount of $311,140 and take any actions to allocate the funding to use an ordinance with federal and state guidelines.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for you went through all that. Do we have any public comment?
Yes, we do.
Sorry, Manny.
That's okay.
All right. This is from Thomas Burns. More socialism and the moneymakers keep leaving California at an escalating rate. The Bible says if a man does not work, neither should he eat. I talked to a hardworking husband and wife who are ranchers today. They are leaving California for this specific reason. They are sick of the government giveaway to those who do not want to work. What happened to self-help, earning a living on your own? Mark, I have not found too many people that want to work. A lot of people want to get paid, but working is another story. There is a shortage of people that want to work construction trades. I think you have experienced that in the business you are in also. And his last comment, I'm sick of seeing shopping carts on Market Street. Get it cleaned up. The city needs to get the carts off the street. Do something about it. Also, transients walking right in front of traffic.
All right. Any other comment?
No others.
Really? Okay. All right, so we do have a motion on the table to approve staff's recommendation, which is all three of those up there. And I think you went so far as to, did you specify the percentages as well?
What staff's recommendation was 50-50.
Okay, all right. And do you will,
I will second that.
All right.
With the 50/50
we go 50-50 for this year?
Yes.
for this year only.
All right, and all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed?
No.
And one no. You got the tally there?
You want to recall?
Vice Mayor, no, we're good, just making sure you clarify. Okay, good. All right, thank you, Ben. We'll see you again.